They say the mountains have ears, but deep in the ancient hollows of Appalachia, I found a family that listens and speaks in ways that will twist your very soul. My name is Alastair Finch. I was a folklorist, drawn to the Cumberland Mountains by vague academic interest. I studied vanishing dialects, forgotten crafts, and the quiet dignity of a people fiercely resistant to the outside world. I came looking for stories, not to become one. But in a place the locals called the Whispering Hollow, where the mist never quite lifts and the silence hums with an unnerving resonance, I stumbled upon a family name deliberately erased from public record for over a century. The Blackwood clan locals don't just avoid the Blackwoods, they fear the sound of their name. They cross themselves, spit, and turn away with a look in their eyes that speaks of generations of dread. This isn't a tale of feuding families or illicit stills. This is something far older, far darker, something that challenges everything I thought I knew about what families will do to preserve their legacy. My journey began with the recovered journals of a botanist named Elias Thorne. He'd vanished in 1927, just as the first tremors of economic hardship began to grip the mountain communities. Thorne was mapping rare plant species, charting areas of unique geological activity for a university study, captivated by the mountain's untouched biodiversity. What he discovered in that narrow, mist-shrouded hollow, nestled between two unnamed peaks, would haunt me long after I read his final, frantic entries. Thorne's journal, unearthed by chance during a controlled burn years later, detailed an unnerving encounter. His last entry, dated November 11th, 1927, read, "They invited me to their supper. The silence was heavier than the food. They watched me, their eyes like embers in the dim light. I ate what they placed before me. God forgive me. I know now why the plants here grow so unnaturally." Thorne's samples, his field equipment, his meticulously pressed botanical specimens, they were found 3 weeks later, arranged in a perfect, unsettling circle around a crude stone altar that, according to aged maps, should not have existed in that part of the valley the Blackwood clan first surfaced in regional records around 1835. Their origins were a baffling void. Unlike other Appalachian lineages, who proudly traced their roots to Scottish, Irish, or English immigrants, the Blackwoods seem to have simply coalesced from the very bedrock of the mountains themselves. Early census documents listed their occupation as custodians of the deep ways, a designation found nowhere else in any historical register I've ever seen. What truly unnerved me about the Blackwoods wasn't their isolation or their outright rejection of modern advancements. It was their preternatural ability to thrive when every other neighboring family withered. During brutal winters that claimed lives by the score, when disease swept through livestock and blighted crops, the Blackwoods didn't just survive. They flourished. Their cattle remained robust, their fields yielded impossible harvests from barren soil, and their children were born strong, living to ages that seemed to defy the harsh realities of mountain life. While infant mortality devastated surrounding communities, local whispers, passed down through generations like a creeping vine, attributed their success to a pact forged by the clan patriarch, old Silas Blackwood, during the calamitous winter of 1840. That year brought unprecedented cold and famine to the mountains. Families were found frozen in their cabins, their meager food stores inexplicably depleted despite careful rationing. The winter seemed to stretch endlessly, snowfall continuing well into what should have been spring. According to these hushed accounts, Silas Blackwood ventured alone into the deepest part of the hollow during the winter solstice, carrying with him a bundle. Some claimed it held ancient family heirlooms, but others, with a shiver, insisted it contained something far more precious, a living sacrifice. He returned 3 days later, his coal-black hair turned utterly white despite being only 32. His eyes held a deep, ancient knowledge that unnerved his neighbors, a chilling wisdom that wasn't human. From that winter forward, the Blackwood family never lacked for anything. But their prosperity came with observable changes, subtle at first, then growing more pronounced with each passing generation. Clan members developed an aversion to sunlight, conducting most of their activities during dawn, dusk, or in the complete darkness of night. They spoke in whispers among themselves, using a guttural dialect that predated any known Appalachian speech patterns, a language that felt older than the trees. More troubling were their eating habits. The Blackwoods never hunted the local game that sustained other mountain families. They kept no traditional livestock, raised no recognizable crops. Yet, visitors recounted elaborate meals, dishes that tasted unlike anything they had ever experienced. Those who dined with the Blackwoods often left feeling simultaneously sated and deeply unsettled, many experiencing vivid, disturbing nightmares for weeks afterward. The family's physical appearance also subtly evolved in ways that defied natural explanation. Each generation grew taller, more angular, with bone structures that seemed almost predatory. Their eyes developed an unusual, almost feline luminosity in low light, and their teeth grew in unsettling patterns that no dental science could explain. Children were occasionally born with additional fingers or toes, always carefully removed in private ceremonies before any outside observer could document them. Perhaps most disturbing was their relationship with death. While other Appalachian families grieved their losses according to traditional mountain customs, the Blackwoods conducted burial rituals exclusively at night, with no outside witnesses permitted. Their cemetery, hidden deep in the hollow's most inaccessible region, contained graves arranged in geometric patterns rather than the typical family plots. Local ministers refused to perform services for Blackwood clan members, claiming the family's spiritual practices were incompatible with Christian doctrine. One circuit preacher, Brother Josiah Vance, a man of iron faith who attempted to bring salvation to the clan in 1888, was found 3 days later wandering the mountains in a state of complete mental collapse. He spent his remaining years in an asylum, endlessly drawing the same unsettling symbol: a gnarled tree with roots that twisted and writhed into grotesque human shapes beneath the earth. The Blackwood children attended no schools and interacted minimally with other mountain families, yet they demonstrated knowledge that seemed far beyond their years or circumstances. They could predict weather patterns with uncanny accuracy, locate hidden water sources in the driest droughts, and navigate the treacherous mountain terrain in complete darkness. Some possessed what appeared to be healing abilities, though their methods involved practices that made even the most hardened mountain folk deeply uncomfortable. By the early 1900s, the Blackwood influence had spread beyond their immediate valley. Neighboring families, desperate in times of crisis, began subtly adopting some of their customs. A change in burial practices here, an alteration in food preparation there. The cumulative effect created a diffuse network of families bound by shared secrets and an unsettling mutual dependence. The first serious official attempt to investigate the Blackwood clan came in 1915, when federal agents suspected them of involvement in illegal liquor operations. Prohibition enforcement officers noticed that several known bootlegging operations across 3 counties seemed to center around the Whispering Hollow. Yet no evidence of distillation equipment or alcohol storage was ever discovered. A team of 6 federal agents entered the valley on a clear October morning, armed with warrants and accompanied by local guides who had reluctantly agreed to lead them to the Blackwood settlement. The guides turned back before reaching the family compound, claiming their horses refused to proceed further and that an unseasonable, suffocating fog had made navigation impossible. The federal agents continued alone. Radio contact was lost within hours, though headquarters continued to receive fragmented, increasingly incoherent transmissions for several days. Agents reported impossible phenomena: trees that moved when no wind was blowing, the sounds of machinery operating where none should exist, and the constant, chilling sensation of being watched by unseen observers. The final transmission, received at 3:17 a.m. on October 15th, consisted of a single agent's voice, speaking in what linguists later identified as no known human language, a series of guttural clicks and ancient whispers. The recording was classified immediately and remains sealed in federal archives to this day. When a military rescue operation reached the valley 2 weeks later, they found no trace of the missing agents. The Blackwood settlement appeared to have been abandoned for decades, with buildings showing signs of age and weather damage that should have taken years to accumulate. Most disturbing was the discovery of 6 perfectly preserved federal badges, arranged in a perfect circle around what appeared to be a recently used fire pit. The military investigation was abruptly terminated after 3 days. All personnel reassigned to different duties and sworn to secrecy under national security provisions. The official report classified the incident as a routine training accident, with the missing agents listed as casualties of a helicopter crash in a different state entirely. Following the federal investigation, sightings of Blackwood clan members became increasingly rare and conflicting. Some claimed the entire clan had vanished, dissolving into the mountain mist like something from folklore. Others insisted they had merely moved deeper into the wilderness, establishing new settlements in areas too remote for outside interference. What remained consistent were the ongoing strange phenomena throughout the region. Hikers reported finding campsites that appeared to have been recently used, but contained no recognizable camping equipment. Hunters discovered animal remains arranged in patterns that served no obvious purpose. Local wildlife began exhibiting unusual behaviors, with typically solitary creatures gathering in groups and nocturnal animals active during daylight hours, their eyes holding a glint that seemed to echo the Blackwoods. The Blackwood legend might have faded into regional folklore, if not for a series of unsettling incidents in the 1970s that brought renewed, terrifying attention to their mysterious legacy. Construction crews building a new highway through the mountains began experiencing equipment failures and worker injuries at an alarming rate. The problem seemed concentrated around a specific area that geological surveys indicated should have been ideal for road construction. When crews attempted to excavate what they believed was a natural depression, they uncovered stone structures that predated any known Native American settlements in the region. The stonework displayed a craftsmanship that engineers couldn't explain, with joints so precise that no mortar had been necessary and weight distributions that defied conventional understanding of construction techniques. More disturbing was the discovery of chambers beneath these stone structures. These underground spaces contained artifacts that archaeologists were unable to classify or date accurately. The objects appeared to be tools or ceremonial implements, but their purpose remained chillingly unclear. Many were crafted from materials that didn't match any known regional resources, suggesting trade networks or knowledge that contradicted established historical understanding of the area's development. The highway project was quietly rerouted after a series of accidents that claimed 7 lives in 3 weeks, each death more bizarre and gruesome than the last. The investigation into the Blackwood family's activities intensified dramatically following the 1970s construction incident. But what authorities discovered during their subsequent probes defied all conventional explanation. Federal agents who entered the exposed underground chambers reported finding rooms that seemed to extend far beyond what the mountain's geology should have allowed. More disturbing were the perfectly preserved artifacts. They uncovered items that appeared to be centuries old, yet showed no signs of decay or weathering. Among the most unsettling discoveries were detailed journals, written in multiple hands but spanning impossible time frames. The earliest entries, dated to 1836, described the original pact in chilling detail. According to these accounts, Silas Blackwood had not simply made a bargain for survival during that harsh winter. The ritual described in these texts was far more complex than local folklore had suggested. It involved not just the sacrifice of their human frailty, but the systematic transformation of their very essence. The process required monthly ceremonies where clan members would descend into the deepest chambers of their mountain home chambers that connected to a vast network of natural caverns that seemed to extend impossibly deep into the earth. During these rituals, the Blackwoods would commune with presences that existed in the spaces between worlds. The journals described these entities as ancient beyond human comprehension, beings that had dwelt in the mountain's depths since long before the first humans walked the continent. These watchers of the root had been waiting, according to the writings, for a family desperate enough to accept their terms and wise enough to honor the agreement across generations. The transformation granted to the Blackwoods was gradual but profound. Each generation became more attuned to the supernatural forces that permeated their mountain home. They developed abilities that local residents had witnessed but never fully understood. Members of the family could navigate the treacherous mountain paths in complete darkness, seemed to know of approaching weather changes days in advance, and possessed an uncanny ability to locate lost travelers in the wilderness. Though whether they chose to help or harm these unfortunate souls depended entirely on circumstances known only to them. More troubling were the physical changes documented in the journals. Blackwood children were born with unusual eye coloration that seemed to shift between deep gray and an unsettling phosphorescent green, depending on the lighting. Their hearing became so acute that they could allegedly detect conversations from miles away when the wind conditions were favorable. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to age at a significantly slower rate than normal humans, with family members maintaining their physical prime well into their 70s and 80s, their faces barely lined, their bodies wiry and strong. The price for these gifts became clearer as investigators studied the recovered documents. Every third generation, the family was required to provide what the journals termed a willing vessel to the watchers beneath. This individual would undergo a final transformation, becoming something that was no longer entirely human. They would descend into the deepest chambers and never return to the surface, instead joining the watchers in their eternal vigil beneath the mountain. The journals contained detailed genealogical records that painted a disturbing picture of this cycle. Names of clan members were carefully tracked, with specific notations indicating which individuals had been selected for the final transformation. The entries described how these chosen family members would gradually withdraw from normal activities in the months leading up to their descent, spending increasing amounts of time in the underground chambers and speaking in languages that other family members didn't recognize, ancient whispers echoing from their lips. What made these accounts particularly chilling was their matter-of-fact tone. The family clearly viewed this arrangement not as a curse or a tragedy, but as a sacred duty that ensured their continued prosperity and protection. The journals spoke of the chosen ones with reverence, describing them as achieving a higher form of existence that allowed them to better serve both their family and the ancient powers that had granted them their abilities. Federal investigators also discovered evidence of the family's influence extending far beyond their immediate mountain territory. The journals contained references to a network of allies and associates scattered throughout the Appalachian region. Individuals and families who had entered into lesser agreements with the Blackwoods and, by extension, with the Watchers beneath. These associates served as the family's eyes and ears throughout the mountains, reporting on the movements of outsiders and ensuring that the Blackwoods' activities remained hidden from unwanted scrutiny. This network explained many of the strange incidents that had plagued investigators over the years. Equipment failures, missing evidence, and the sudden reluctance of witnesses to cooperate were all orchestrated by this extended network of loyal dependents. The reach of this influence was staggering, extending into local law enforcement, government offices, and even federal agencies. Several investigators found their careers mysteriously stalled or derailed after becoming too involved in Blackwood-related cases. The journals also revealed the true extent of the family's supernatural abilities. Beyond their enhanced physical capabilities, the Blackwoods had developed what they called the far sight, an ability to perceive events occurring at great distances. This gift allowed them to monitor potential threats and opportunities throughout the region, explaining their uncanny ability to avoid capture or investigation for so many decades. More disturbing were references to the calling, a form of mental influence that the family could exert over others. This ability seemed to work most effectively on individuals who were already vulnerable due to emotional distress, physical illness, or financial desperation. The journals described how clan members would use this power to draw suitable candidates to their mountain territory. Individuals who could serve various purposes in their ongoing arrangements with the Watchers beneath the investigation also uncovered evidence of the family's involvement in numerous disappearances throughout the region over the past century. Unlike random crimes, these disappearances followed specific patterns that seemed to correspond with the astronomical and seasonal cycles described in the family's ritual calendar. These disappearances served multiple purposes for the Blackwoods. Some victims were used in the family's ritual practices, their life force somehow channeled to strengthen the family's connection to the Watchers beneath. The fate of these individuals was never explicitly stated, but the implications were deeply troubling. The journals also contained detailed maps of the underground chamber system, revealing a complex network that extended far beyond what natural geological processes could have created. These tunnels connected not only different sections of the Blackwood Mountain territory, but also reached toward other significant locations throughout the region. These emergence points were particularly significant, as they appeared to be strategically located near population centers throughout the Appalachian region. The journals suggested that family members used these hidden access points to monitor and influence events in the wider world, moving through their underground network to appear suddenly in distant locations without being detected by conventional surveillance methods. The investigation team also discovered evidence of the family's involvement in various historical events throughout the region. The journals contained detailed accounts of their activities during the Civil War, when they apparently provided assistance to both Union and Confederate forces, depending on which side offered the most advantageous terms. During the industrial boom of the early 20th century, the family had used their supernatural abilities to locate mineral deposits and guide mining operations, always ensuring that they received a cut of the profits while remaining invisible partners in these ventures. Perhaps most disturbing were the journal entries describing the family's plans for the future. The writings spoke of a coming time when the barriers between worlds would weaken, allowing the watchers beneath to emerge more fully into the human realm. The Blackwoods saw themselves as preparing for this eventuality, building the infrastructure and network of allies that would be necessary to manage the transition. The journals described this future time as the Great Unveiling, when humanity would finally understand its true place in a cosmos far stranger and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The investigation was abruptly terminated when several key pieces of evidence mysteriously disappeared from secure federal facilities. The journals, maps, and artifacts that had been carefully catalogued and stored vanished without explanation, leaving behind only the testimonies of the agents who had studied them. Attempts to relocate the underground chambers were unsuccessful, as the construction team found that the exposed areas had been completely sealed with materials that appeared to be naturally occurring rock formations. The agents who had been involved in the investigation reported ongoing harassment and surveillance following the case's closure. Several experienced equipment failures, accidents, and personal problems that effectively ended their careers in federal law enforcement. Those who attempted to publish accounts of their findings faced legal challenges and personal threats that convinced them to abandon their efforts. Despite the official termination of the investigation, reports of unusual activities in the Blackwood territory continued to surface. Hikers and hunters described encounters with individuals who matched the family's distinctive appearance, though these sightings were always brief and occurred in remote areas where verification was impossible. Local residents noted that missing person cases in the region continued to follow the same patterns documented in the recovered journals, suggesting that the family's activities had not ceased, but had simply become more carefully concealed. The Blackwood legend became a cautionary tale within federal law enforcement circles, whispered about in training programs, and used as an example of cases that exceeded the boundaries of conventional criminal investigation. The incident established protocols for dealing with phenomena that couldn't be easily explained or prosecuted through normal legal channels, creating a shadowy department within federal agencies that specialized in such matters. Modern technology has occasionally captured evidence that suggests the Blackwood family's influence persists. Satellite imagery has detected thermal anomalies in their former territory that indicate significant underground activity. Seismic monitoring equipment has recorded unusual vibrations emanating from the mountain depths, patterns that don't match any known geological phenomena. Radio and cellular communications experience regular interference in the area, with devices sometimes picking up transmissions in languages that linguists cannot identify, sounding like the guttural whispers I read about in Thorne's journal. The mountain itself seems to actively resist modern surveillance efforts. GPS systems malfunction when approaching the territory, providing coordinates that lead to impossible locations or simply failing entirely. Aircraft flying over the area report instrument failures and navigation errors that force them to alter their flight paths. Even ground-penetrating radar and other advanced detection equipment produces inconclusive results, as if the mountain itself contains materials or structures that conventional technology cannot properly analyze. The Blackwood case has become a touchstone for researchers studying the intersection of folklore, unexplained phenomena, and criminal activity in isolated rural communities. The family's century-long success in maintaining their secrets while operating in plain sight has influenced how investigators approach similar cases throughout the country. Their story serves as a chilling reminder that in America's most remote regions, ancient practices and beliefs can persist alongside modern civilization, creating pockets of mystery that challenge our understanding of reality itself. The watchers of the route, if they truly exist, remain patient in their mountain depths, served by a family whose commitment to their otherworldly masters has endured for generations. The Blackwoods continue their long service, adapting to changing times while maintaining the essential elements of their supernatural covenant. The true scope of the Blackwood influence extends far beyond their mountain stronghold, reaching into the corridors of power across America, creating a web of protection that has shielded them from exposure for over a century. Federal investigations that should have exposed their activities have been systematically undermined. Witnesses have vanished, and evidence has disappeared from secure government facilities with no explanation. The family's reach extends into agencies that most Americans trust to protect them. In 1968, FBI Special Agent Benjamin Cole received authorization to investigate unusual reports from the Cumberland Mountains. Multiple sources had reported organized criminal activity, missing persons cases with disturbing patterns, and what informants described as ritualistic behavior involving local families. Cole, a decorated agent with 18 years of experience investigating organized crime, assembled a team of 5 investigators and established a field office in a nearby town. Within 3 weeks, Cole's reports became increasingly erratic. His superiors noted that his usually precise documentation had become rambling and paranoid. He wrote of being followed by figures that seemed to appear and disappear at will, of electronic equipment malfunctioning in specific geographic areas, and of dreams so vivid they left him questioning his own sanity. Cole and his entire team vanished one night. Their vehicles were found parked at their hotel, personal belongings undisturbed, but no sign of the 5 agents. The FBI launched a massive search operation involving over 200 personnel, but found no trace of the missing men. More disturbing, all case files related to the investigation had been removed from FBI headquarters, with no record of who had authorized their transfer or where they had been taken. The official explanation cited a gas leak explosion in a remote mine shaft, though no bodies were ever recovered and local mining records showed no active operations in the area. The case was classified and sealed, with surviving family members told their loved ones had died in the line of duty during a routine investigation. Similar patterns emerged with other federal agencies. In 1975, DEA agents investigating reported drug manufacturing in the region experienced identical circumstances. Equipment failures, psychological pressure, and ultimately complete disappearance of investigation teams became so common that by the 1980s, federal agencies had quietly established unofficial protocols avoiding the Cumberland Mountains entirely. The Blackwood influence within government agencies became apparent through careful analysis of personnel records. Key positions in the FBI, DEA, ATF, and even the Department of Justice were held by individuals with surnames tracing back to Appalachian bloodlines connected to the original Pact families. These weren't necessarily direct descendants of the Blackwoods themselves, but members of allied clans whose ancestors had been present during the original agreements. Senator Olivia Thorne of Kentucky, who served on the Senate Intelligence Committee from 1990 to 2005, was instrumental in redirecting federal investigations away from certain Appalachian regions. Her grandfather had been a miller, one of the lesser families known to have participated in the original rituals. Congressional records show that Senator Thorne consistently blocked funding for federal investigations in eastern Kentucky, citing budget concerns and constitutional issues with federal overreach. More recently, the Department of Homeland Security established a classified research division known internally as the Mountain Shadow Task Force. Documents obtained through carefully worded Freedom of Information Act requests reveal that this task force was specifically created to monitor and contain information about supernatural phenomena in the region. The task force's budget, hidden within routine infrastructure spending, exceeds $70 million annually. The task force operates under protocols that seem designed more to protect the phenomena than investigate them. Equipment used in the region must be specially designed to function in areas with unusual electromagnetic properties. Private contractors working with the government have also encountered the Blackwood influence. In 1998, A geological survey team hired by the Department of Energy to assess shale gas reserves in the Cumberland Mountains reported discovering underground structures that didn't appear on any historical records. The structures were described as elaborate tunnel systems with architectural features unlike anything in known American history. The survey team's leader, Dr. Evelyn Vance, a respected geologist with 25 years of experience, initially submitted standard reports noting unusual mineral formations. However, her private journal, recovered after her death in a bizarre hiking accident 2 months later, told a different story. She wrote of tunnels that seemed to extend for miles beneath the mountains, of chambers carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly, and of sounds emanating from depths that their equipment couldn't measure. Dr. Vance's final journal entry described an encounter that left her questioning her scientific training. We were mapping the 5th level when the lights failed. Emergency illumination showed we were no longer alone. Figures stood in passages that hadn't been there moments before. They didn't move like people. They watched us with eyes that reflected light like animals, but their intelligence was unmistakably human, perhaps more than human. When the lights returned, they were gone, but they left behind objects on our equipment table. Small, smooth stones that pulsed with an internal light. The entire survey project was terminated the following week, officially due to budget constraints. All equipment and samples were confiscated by federal agents, and team members were required to sign comprehensive non-disclosure agreements backed by national security provisions. Corporate interests have also discovered the impossibility of operating in Blackwood territory without their consent. Mining companies that attempt to establish operations in the region experience consistent equipment failures, worker injuries, and financial difficulties that seem to defy logical explanation. Insurance companies have quietly established internal policies, refusing to provide coverage for operations in specific zip codes throughout eastern Kentucky and western Virginia. The Blackwood protection extends into the digital age as well. Internet service providers report persistent technical difficulties maintaining connections in certain areas. Cell phone towers experience unusual equipment failures, and GPS systems frequently malfunction when navigating through specific mountain passes. Satellite imagery of the region often shows atmospheric distortions that obscure ground details, officially attributed to unique weather patterns caused by the mountain topography. More troubling are the accounts from military personnel who have encountered Blackwood influence during training exercises or emergency responses. A classified after-action report from a National Guard unit deployed during severe flooding in 2005 describes soldiers experiencing shared hallucinations while conducting search and rescue operations. Multiple personnel reported seeing figures moving through the floodwaters with impossible speed and agility, appearing to guide survivors to safety while avoiding direct contact with military personnel. The unit's commanding officer, Colonel Samuel Briggs, noted in his report that local civilians seemed to expect this supernatural assistance. Flood victims spoke of the hollow folk who appear during disasters, helping those in need while remaining invisible to outside authorities. When questioned directly, these civilians would become evasive, claiming they had been confused or traumatized by their ordeal. Perhaps most disturbing are reports from federal prison systems. Inmates transferred from facilities in the Appalachian region often arrive with unusual behavioral modifications. Prison psychologists have documented cases of violent criminals becoming docile and cooperative after spending time in certain county jails. These inmates speak of dreams involving ancient contracts and obligations that extend beyond their individual crimes. One former inmate, speaking anonymously to a journalist investigating prison conditions, described his experience in a Kentucky county jail. "They kept me in a cell that was older than the rest of the building. The walls had marks carved into them, symbols that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. At night, I could hear singing from somewhere deep underground, a hum that settled in your bones and told you things that weren't meant for human ears." The inmate reported that his violent tendencies, which had resulted in multiple assault charges, completely disappeared during his incarceration. He attributed this to constant dreams in which he was judged by figures he couldn't clearly see, but whose authority he couldn't question. Upon release, his behavioral changes persisted, leading him to abandon his criminal lifestyle and relocate to another state, terrified of returning. Intelligence agencies have also documented unusual diplomatic considerations involving the Blackwood territory. During the Cold War, Soviet satellite reconnaissance identified the Cumberland Mountains as a region of strategic interest, though declassified documents don't specify why. American intelligence responses suggest knowledge of activities in the region that could be considered matters of national security. A 1980 CIA memo, heavily redacted but partially readable, discusses unconventional assets in Appalachian regions and their potential value in asymmetric warfare scenarios. The memo recommends maintaining current protocols of non-interference while exploring possibilities for cooperation in extreme circumstances. The nature of these unconventional assets is not specified, but the memo's classification level suggests capabilities beyond conventional military resources. International intelligence services have also taken note of the Blackwood phenomenon. British intelligence files released under their 30-year rule reference American briefings about indigenous supernatural elements that could affect joint operations in certain geographic areas. These briefings apparently included protocols for avoiding specific regions during clandestine activities and procedures for dealing with personnel who reported unusual experiences. The technological challenges of monitoring the Blackwood territory have led to innovative solutions that push the boundaries of current surveillance capabilities. Advanced sensor networks designed to function in electromagnetically hostile environments have been deployed around the region's perimeter. These systems are reportedly more sophisticated than equipment used in foreign intelligence operations, suggesting the government considers internal monitoring of the area a high priority. However, even these advanced systems experience regular failures. Maintenance crews report equipment that functions perfectly during testing but malfunctions when deployed in specific locations. Sensors are found relocated from their installation points with no evidence of human interference. Data collected from functioning equipment often contains anomalies that technical analysts cannot explain within current scientific understanding. The cumulative effect of this government involvement and protection has created a bubble of isolation around the Blackwood territory that ensures their activities remain hidden from public scrutiny. Federal agencies actively redirect investigations, corporate interests are discouraged through mysterious difficulties, and information systems are compromised to prevent documentation of unusual phenomena. This protection operates at multiple levels simultaneously. Local law enforcement receives federal guidance about jurisdictional limitations in certain areas. State governments encounter budgetary and legal obstacles when considering investigations. Federal agencies experience personnel transfers and budget reallocations that effectively terminate problematic inquiries. The sophistication of this protection suggests coordination between the Blackwood family and elements within the government that goes far beyond simple corruption or influence peddling. The consistency of protection across multiple administrations and agencies indicates institutional knowledge and procedures that have become embedded in the federal bureaucracy itself. Most Americans remain completely unaware that their government maintains active protocols for dealing with supernatural phenomena on domestic soil. The Blackwood family represents not just a hidden danger, but a fundamental challenge to the assumption that government agencies operate according to publicly understood principles and limitations. The implications extend beyond the specific threat posed by the Blackwood family to questions about what other supernatural or unconventional elements might be operating under similar government protection. If one family can maintain such extensive influence over federal agencies, what other hidden powers might be shaping American policy and society from the shadows? The Blackwood legacy demonstrates that the boundary between government and supernatural forces has been crossed, creating a hybrid system of power that operates outside democratic oversight or constitutional limitations. The federal government isn't the only institution working to keep the Blackwood family's supernatural activities hidden from public scrutiny. Corporate America, with its vast resources and vested interests in maintaining regional stability, has quietly become one of the most effective tools in the ongoing cover-up. What began as isolated incidents of corporate interference has evolved into a sophisticated network of financial manipulation, strategic acquisitions, and calculated suppression that rivals any government conspiracy. The mining industry was among the first to recognize the potential threat that supernatural revelations could pose to their operations. Coal and natural gas companies operating throughout Appalachia discovered early on that investigations into unexplained phenomena often led to uncomfortable questions about their own extraction methods and the true extent of what they were pulling from the earth. When researchers began documenting unusual geological formations, unexplained energy readings, and bizarre mineral compositions in areas surrounding Blackwood territory, mining executives realized they needed to take action. Deep Earth Resources, one of the largest coal extraction companies in the region, established what they internally called the Regional Anomaly Division in 1990. Officially tasked with community relations and environmental compliance, the division's actual purpose was far more sinister. Internal documents obtained through a carefully executed Freedom of Information Act request, heavily redacted, but still revealing, show that the division maintained detailed files on every researcher, journalist, and government official who had shown interest in supernatural phenomena throughout the Cumberland Mountains. The division's methods were sophisticated and multifaceted. They would identify potential threats to their operations, individuals whose research might draw unwanted attention to the region, and then systematically work to discredit or neutralize them. Academic researchers found their funding mysteriously cut, their university positions eliminated during budget restructuring, or their work discredited through planted evidence of academic misconduct. Journalists discovered that their editors were suddenly reluctant to publish stories about Appalachian mysteries, often citing concerns about liability or lack of credible sources. More disturbing were the personal interventions. Dr. Lena Cross, a geologist from the University of Tennessee who had documented several unexplained mineral formations in the region, found herself facing a series of escalating problems after publishing her preliminary findings. First, her research grant was revoked due to what the university called administrative irregularities. Then, her academic credentials were challenged when anonymous sources provided evidence of alleged plagiarism in her doctoral dissertation. Finally, she was arrested on charges of trespassing and theft of geological samples, charges that were eventually dropped, but not before her reputation was thoroughly destroyed. The pharmaceutical industry's involvement began more recently, but has proven equally effective. When blood samples from individuals claiming supernatural encounters began showing up in medical laboratories, pharmaceutical companies quickly recognized both the potential value and the danger of this biological evidence. Several major pharmaceutical corporations, including Summit Biopharma and Evergreen Therapeutics, established research facilities in the region under the guise of studying Appalachian genetic markers and traditional herbal remedies. These facilities serve a dual purpose. Officially, they conduct legitimate research into the genetic diversity of isolated mountain populations and the potential medical applications of indigenous plant knowledge. Unofficially, they intercept and analyze any biological samples that might provide evidence of supernatural influence. Hospital laboratories throughout the region have been quietly contracted to forward unusual blood work, tissue samples, and medical imaging results to these pharmaceutical research centers. Dr. Julian Reed, a former researcher at Summit Biopharma's Cumberland Research Facility, broke his non-disclosure agreement in 2021 to reveal what he had witnessed during his 4-year tenure. According to Reed, the facility maintained a classified wing dedicated to studying biological samples that displayed properties that defied conventional medical understanding. Blood samples that remained fresh for months without refrigeration, tissue samples that regenerated when damaged, and genetic markers that appeared to be actively evolving in real time. Reed described one particularly disturbing case involving a blood sample from a man who claimed to have had contact with the Blackwood family. The sample exhibited properties that Reed characterized as impossible according to current medical science. The blood cells appeared to be more resilient than normal human cells, showing resistance to radiation, chemical damage, and even controlled freezing. More unsettling was the sample's apparent ability to influence other biological materials in the laboratory, causing normal blood samples stored nearby to develop similar unusual properties. When Reed attempted to publish his findings, He discovered that his employment contract contained clauses that effectively prevented him from discussing his research with anyone outside the company. Legal challenges to these clauses were unsuccessful, with courts ruling that the pharmaceutical company's proprietary research was protected under trade secret laws. Reed's attempts to contact journalists and researchers were met with legal threats, and eventually he was forced to relocate to another state and change his name to escape ongoing harassment, living under a constant shadow. The technology sector's involvement is perhaps the most sophisticated and far-reaching. Silicon Valley companies have discovered that their advanced surveillance and data analysis capabilities make them invaluable partners in monitoring and suppressing information about supernatural phenomena. Social media platforms have implemented algorithms specifically designed to identify and limit the spread of content related to Appalachian supernatural activities. These algorithms work by analyzing patterns in user behavior, content engagement, and information sharing to identify posts, videos, and articles that might contain genuine evidence of supernatural phenomena. Content that meets certain criteria is automatically flagged for reduced distribution, meaning it appears less frequently in users' feeds and search results. More sophisticated interventions involve the strategic promotion of debunking content, skeptical analysis, and alternative explanations that can effectively bury genuine evidence under an avalanche of contradictory information. The effectiveness of these technological interventions became apparent during a 2018 incident when a hiker's smartphone captured clear video footage of what appeared to be a Blackwood family member displaying superhuman abilities. The video, which showed an individual moving at impossible speeds and manipulating objects without physical contact, was uploaded to multiple social media platforms simultaneously. Within hours, the video had been viewed by thousands of users and was beginning to generate significant discussion and analysis. However, the video's viral potential was quickly neutralized through a coordinated response. The original uploads were flagged for copyright violations, claiming that the footage contained unauthorized use of copyrighted material. Alternative versions that appeared on other platforms were accompanied by professionally produced debunking videos that offered plausible explanations for the apparent supernatural phenomena. These debunking videos, which appeared to be created by independent skeptics, were actually produced by a digital marketing firm under contract with undisclosed clients. Designed to sow doubt and confusion, the financial services industry has contributed to the cover-up through strategic economic interventions. Banks and investment firms have been used to apply financial pressure on individuals and organizations that might pose a threat to the secrecy surrounding the Blackwood family. This pressure takes many forms, from the sudden calling in of loans to the mysterious manipulation of credit ratings and investment portfolios. Mountain Peak Bank, a financial institution that serves much of rural Appalachia, has played a particularly active role in these economic interventions. Internal emails leaked by a whistleblower revealed that the bank maintained a special classification system for loan applications and account holders. Individuals who had expressed interest in supernatural phenomena, conducted research into unexplained events, or claimed to have had encounters with the Blackwood family were flagged in the bank's internal systems. These flagged individuals found themselves facing unexpected financial difficulties. Loan applications were denied for reasons that didn't align with their actual creditworthiness. Existing loans were called in early due to technical violations of contract terms that had previously been overlooked. Investment accounts showed unusual losses that couldn't be explained by market conditions. Business owners discovered that their commercial loans were being transferred to new lenders with less favorable terms, forcing them to either accept increased financial burdens or risk foreclosure. The insurance industry has also played a role in maintaining the cover-up, though their involvement is more subtle. Insurance companies have developed risk assessment models that effectively discourage investigation into supernatural phenomena by classifying such activities as high-risk behaviors that void coverage. Researchers, journalists, and investigators who pursue stories related to Appalachian supernatural activities often find that their life insurance policies are canceled or their premiums increased to prohibitive levels. More concerning are the patterns in claims processing related to incidents that might involve supernatural elements. Property damage, personal injuries, and other losses that occur in areas associated with Blackwood family activity are often subject to extensive investigation and delayed payment. Insurance adjusters are reportedly trained to look for alternative explanations for unusual damage patterns, and claims that might suggest supernatural involvement are frequently denied based on policy exclusions for acts of war, terrorism, or other extraordinary circumstances. A chillingly broad catch-all the entertainment industry has contributed to the cover-up through a different but equally effective strategy. The deliberate popularization of fictional supernatural content that makes genuine phenomena appear less credible. Television shows, movies, and books featuring supernatural themes have been strategically developed and promoted to saturate popular culture with fictional representations of paranormal activity. This saturation serves multiple purposes. It provides plausible explanations for genuine supernatural encounters, allowing witnesses to be dismissed as individuals who have been influenced by popular entertainment. It creates a cultural context in which supernatural claims are automatically associated with fiction rather than reality. And it provides a ready-made framework for debunking genuine evidence by comparing it to special effects and fictional narratives. Production companies have received anonymous funding for projects that specifically mirror the types of supernatural phenomena associated with the Blackwood family. These productions often feature storylines that closely parallel genuine accounts but are presented as pure entertainment. When real witnesses come forward with similar stories, their accounts are easily dismissed as being derived from these fictional sources, blurring the lines of what is real. The coordination between these various corporate entities suggests a level of organization that extends beyond simple business interests. Industry conferences, private meetings, and informal networks have created channels for information sharing and strategic planning. Corporate executives who have been briefed on the Blackwood situation maintain communication through encrypted channels and private forums that allow them to coordinate their responses to potential threats. This corporate conspiracy operates with a level of sophistication that rivals government intelligence operations. Unlike government agencies, which are subject to oversight and public accountability, private corporations can operate with much greater secrecy and flexibility. They can move resources quickly, adapt their strategies as needed, and maintain plausible deniability for their actions. The financial resources available to this corporate network are virtually unlimited. Major corporations can absorb the costs of surveillance, legal action, and strategic interventions as routine business expenses. They can hire the best lawyers, fund opposition research, and maintain operations indefinitely without the budget constraints that limit government agencies. Perhaps most troubling is the way this corporate involvement has evolved over time. What began as reactive measures to protect business interests has become a proactive system for identifying and neutralizing potential threats before they can gain traction. Artificial intelligence systems monitor social media, news outlets, and academic publications for content that might relate to supernatural phenomena. Predictive algorithms identify individuals who might be likely to encounter or investigate such phenomena based on their online behavior, location data, and social connections. These technological capabilities have created a surveillance network that extends far beyond the Blackwood family themselves. Anyone who expresses interest in supernatural phenomena, visits areas associated with unexplained events, or conducts research that might lead to uncomfortable discoveries finds themselves under automated scrutiny. Their communications are monitored, their activities tracked, and their vulnerabilities identified in preparation for potential intervention. The effectiveness of this corporate conspiracy has been demonstrated repeatedly. Attempts to organize serious academic research into Appalachian supernatural phenomena have been systematically undermined. Journalists who try to investigate these stories find their editors reluctant to publish their work. Documentary filmmakers discover that their funding disappears or that their distribution channels are suddenly unavailable. Even individual researchers working independently find themselves facing legal challenges, financial pressure, and personal harassment that makes it impossible to continue their work. The corporate conspiracy has also proven remarkably adaptive. When traditional methods of suppression proved insufficient, new approaches were developed and implemented. The rise of social media created new challenges for information control but these were met with sophisticated algorithmic solutions. The increasing availability of recording technology made it harder to suppress evidence, but this was countered by advances in digital manipulation and the strategic promotion of skeptical content. The long-term implications of this corporate involvement extend far beyond the specific case of the Blackwood family. The infrastructure and methods developed for this cover-up create a template that could be applied to suppress any information that powerful interests consider threatening. The precedent of successful corporate manipulation of information, combined with the technological capabilities now available, represents a fundamental threat to transparency and accountability in democratic society. The Blackwood family themselves appear to be aware of, and perhaps even complicit in, this corporate conspiracy. There is evidence suggesting that they have direct relationships with key figures in several of the corporations involved in the cover-up. These relationships may have been established through the same supernatural means that have allowed the family to infiltrate government agencies, or they may represent a more conventional form of business partnership. The ultimate goal of this corporate conspiracy appears to be the same as that of the government cover-up: maintaining the secrecy surrounding the Blackwood family's supernatural activities while preserving the stability of existing power structures. However, the corporate approach offers certain advantages over government intervention. Corporate actions are generally subject to less public scrutiny and oversight. They can be maintained indefinitely without the political considerations that might affect government operations, and they can be scaled up or down as needed without the bureaucratic constraints that limit government agencies. The success of this corporate conspiracy has created a model that other powerful interests have begun to adopt. The techniques developed for suppressing information about supernatural phenomena are now being applied to other sensitive topics, from environmental damage to political corruption. The infrastructure created for the Blackwood cover-up has become a general-purpose tool for information control that extends far beyond its original purpose. What makes the Blackwood conspiracy even more chilling isn't just their supernatural covenant or the institutional cover-up that protects them. It's the terrifying realization that their influence has been quietly shaping American society for generations through a network of carefully placed allies, who may not even realize they're serving an ancient, insidious agenda. The tentacles of this conspiracy reach into boardrooms, classrooms, churches, and government offices across the nation, creating a shadow infrastructure that operates parallel to our official institutions. Consider the educational system first. Over the past century, certain academic programs in Appalachian studies have been mysteriously well-funded despite their niche focus. The Old Ways Endowment, operating through a maze of subsidiary organizations, has provided grants and scholarships that seem generous on the surface but come with subtle, binding strings attached. Recipients often find themselves steered toward specific research topics that either glorify Appalachian folklore or deliberately mischaracterize it as harmless mountain superstition. Dr. Clara Hemlock, who received one such scholarship in 1992, later wrote in her private journals about the strange requirements of her funding. She was expected to submit monthly reports, not just on her academic progress, but on her psychological state, her dreams, and any unusual experiences she encountered during her fieldwork. When she attempted to investigate certain Cumberland mountain legends too deeply, her funding was abruptly terminated, and her academic advisor suddenly transferred to another university. Most disturbing was her final journal entry, where she wrote about feeling watched whenever she was alone and hearing whispers in a language she couldn't identify but somehow, chillingly, understood. The religious infiltration runs even deeper. Across the southeastern United States, certain fundamentalist Christian denominations have embraced practices that seem orthodox, but contain subtle deviations from traditional doctrine. These congregations, often led by charismatic preachers with mysterious funding sources, incorporate elements of mountain spirituality that their members believe are simply regional variations of Christianity. The signs are there for those who know what to look for. These churches often conduct special services during lunar cycles, particularly the new moon. Their communion wine has an unusual, earthy, almost metallic taste that congregants accept as a local tradition. Most tellingly, their baptisms are performed exclusively in natural bodies of water within a 100-mile radius of the Cumberland Mountains. with church buses making regular pilgrimages to specific springs and creeks that have been used for this purpose for over a century. Pastor Arthur Finch, yes, a distant relation of mine, of the Mountain Root Tabernacle in eastern Tennessee, unknowingly served this agenda for 15 years before he began to question certain aspects of his ministry. In a letter he never sent, found after his disappearance in 2020, he wrote about discovering that his church's founding documents contained passages in a crude, ancient Latin that didn't appear in any religious text he could identify. When he had them translated by a linguistics professor, the passages spoke of binding congregations to ancient covenants and preparing souls for harvest by entities described as the Watchers between worlds. The corporate infiltration is perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of this conspiracy. Major corporations that have expanded into Appalachian regions often find themselves with board members or key executives who have mysterious connections to the area. These individuals aren't necessarily Blackwood Clan members, but they share certain characteristics: unusual longevity in their positions, decision-making patterns that favor long-term stability over short-term profits, and a tendency to make choices that benefit the region in ways that seem altruistic but ultimately serve the family's deeper, hidden interests. Take the case of Ether Energy Corporation, which has maintained mining and drilling operations across 5 Appalachian states since the 1970s. Their environmental record is surprisingly clean for such an old company, but not because of regulations. Internal documents leaked in 2005 revealed that the company follows extraction guidelines that have no basis in federal or state law. These rules prohibit drilling below certain depths in specific areas, require elaborate ceremonies before breaking ground in new locations, and mandate that a percentage of extracted materials be returned to designated root sites in the mountains. The leaked documents also revealed the existence of a position within the corporate hierarchy that doesn't appear on any official organizational chart: the Regional Convergence Coordinator. This person, always someone with deep Appalachian roots, has veto power over any operation that might disturb what the documents cryptically refer to as heritage sites. When investigative journalists attempted to interview 3 different people who had held this position over the years, they discovered that all 3 had died in unrelated accidents within 6 months of leaving the company. The technological suppression extends beyond simply hiding evidence of the family's activities. There's growing evidence that certain advances in surveillance, communication, and even artificial intelligence have been selectively deployed to monitor and influence public perception of Appalachian mysteries. Social media algorithms seem to suppress content related to specific mountain legends, while promoting sanitized versions that present them as harmless folklore. Dr. Chloe Vance, a computer scientist who studied these patterns as part of her doctoral thesis, documented how posts containing certain keywords related to Cumberland Mountain phenomena received dramatically reduced visibility on major platforms. Her research showed that videos, articles, and social media posts discussing topics like unexplained disappearances, unusual geological formations, or historical anomalies in the region are systematically buried in search results and social media feeds. Even more disturbing was her discovery of what she termed ghost algorithms, programs that appear to monitor online discussions about these topics and introduce subtle disinformation designed to discredit legitimate accounts. When someone posts about a genuine strange experience in the mountains, within hours their comment threads fill with responses that follow specific patterns. Dismissive explanations involving natural phenomena, suggestions that the person was hallucinating or lying, and references to scientific studies that don't actually exist but sound authoritative enough to convince casual readers. Dr. Vance's research was ultimately suppressed when the university received a substantial donation from a technology company with ties to defense contractors who work in the Appalachian region. Her doctoral advisor suddenly decided her thesis topic was too speculative for academic standards, and her access to the data she'd collected was mysteriously revoked due to what administrators called a routine server upgrade that corrupted her files. The financial networks supporting this conspiracy operate through a web of foundations, trusts, and shell companies that would take forensic accountants years to fully unravel. What investigators have uncovered suggests a financial ecosystem designed not for profit maximization, but for influence maintenance. Money flows in patterns that seem to defy economic logic. Profitable businesses are shuttered if they threaten to bring too much outside attention to sensitive areas, while money-losing operations are sustained indefinitely if they serve the family's interests. The Appalachian Preservation Trust, established in 1955, appears to be a conservation organization dedicated to preserving mountain culture and environment. In reality, it functions as a land acquisition arm of the conspiracy, systematically purchasing properties that contain geological formations, historical sites, or simply strategic locations that could provide outside researchers with access to sensitive areas. The trust's budget is enormous relative to its stated mission, and its funding sources include dozens of corporations and wealthy individuals who have no apparent connection to environmental conservation. What makes this financial network particularly insidious is how it co-opts legitimate organizations and well-meaning individuals. Environmental groups receive grants that come with specific requirements about which areas they can and cannot access for research. Historical societies find their archives mysteriously enriched with documents that support sanitized versions of local history, while more controversial materials vanish during routine reorganizations. Even local newspapers have been subtly influenced, with advertising revenue and community support flowing to publications that stick to safe topics, while those that dig too deeply into local mysteries find themselves struggling financially. The psychological manipulation extends to academic and scientific communities through what researchers call manufactured consensus. When studies or investigations threaten to expose aspects of the conspiracy, they're not simply suppressed through crude censorship. Instead, the scientific community is flooded with contradictory studies, alternative explanations, and methodological criticisms that create an atmosphere of uncertainty and debate that effectively neutralizes the original findings. This technique was perfected in the 1990s when geological surveys began detecting unusual seismic activity in the Cumberland Mountains that didn't match any known natural phenomena. Instead of preventing these findings from being published, the conspiracy funded dozens of additional studies that offered various explanations. Previously unknown fault lines, unusual mineral deposits, underground water systems, and even secret military testing. The sheer volume of contradictory scientific literature created such confusion that the original anomalous findings were lost in the noise. The same approach has been used to explain away unexplained disappearances, unusual wildlife behavior, and electromagnetic anomalies reported in the region. For every legitimate scientific observation that suggests something unusual is happening in the mountains, there are now 10 published papers offering mundane explanations. The result is that anyone researching these phenomena, whether journalist, scientist, or curious citizen, quickly becomes overwhelmed by contradictory information and gives up their investigation, frustrated and convinced it's all just speculation. Perhaps most chilling is the evidence that this conspiracy has been preparing for eventual exposure. Documents recovered from a corporate office fire in 2013 included what appeared to be contingency plans for various scenarios involving public discovery of the family's activities. These plans don't focus on denial or cover-up, but rather on controlling the narrative when the truth eventually emerges. The documents outline strategies for presenting the Blackwood family and their allies as protectors rather than predators, guardians of ancient knowledge that they've kept secret for humanity's own good. They detail plans to release carefully curated information about their supernatural abilities and ancient covenant, framing it as a burden they've carried to protect the world from forces that ordinary people couldn't comprehend or survive. This controlled revelation would be supported by testimonials from respected community leaders, religious figures, and even some government officials who would step forward to vouch for the family's benevolent intentions. The narrative would position them as reluctant heroes who have made tremendous personal sacrifices to maintain a barrier between our world and something far more dangerous that lurks in the spaces between realities. The sophistication of this contingency planning suggests that the conspiracy has been preparing for this possibility for decades, perhaps generations. They've cultivated networks of supporters who genuinely believe in their protective mission, created documentation that supports their preferred version of events, and established legal and financial structures that would allow them to operate openly while maintaining complete control over the narrative. This raises the disturbing possibility that everything we think we know about the Blackwood family and their conspiracy might itself be part of a larger manipulation. Perhaps the very investigation that has uncovered their activities has been guided by them, revealing only what they want revealed, when they want it revealed, and in the way that best serves their ultimate agenda. The implications extend far beyond a single family in the Appalachian Mountains. If such a conspiracy can operate successfully for generations, influencing everything from local politics to national policy, from religious practices to scientific research, from corporate decisions to individual beliefs, then our understanding of how power actually operates in America may be fundamentally flawed. We live in a society that believes in transparency, democratic oversight, and institutional accountability. But the Blackwood conspiracy suggests that parallel to our official institutions runs a shadow system of influence and control that operates by entirely different rules. This shadow system doesn't seek to overthrow or replace our official institutions, but rather to guide them, to shape their decisions in subtle ways that serve agendas most people don't even know exist. The watchers of the route that the Blackwood family serves may be supernatural entities from beyond our reality, but the human systems that serve them are disturbingly familiar. They use the same tools of influence that legitimate organizations use: money, information, social networks, and institutional authority. The difference is that they operate without the constraints of democratic accountability, legal oversight, or moral considerations that limit legitimate institutions. This conspiracy challenges not just our understanding of one family's dark practices, but our fundamental assumptions about how power works in modern America. But what happened next is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this entire conspiracy. As federal agencies and independent researchers began connecting these threads, as evidence started accumulating despite the suppression efforts, something unprecedented occurred. The cover-up evolved beyond mere damage control into active offensive operations designed not just to hide the truth, but to systematically eliminate anyone who came too close to exposing it. In 2008, Dr. Anya Sharma, a cultural anthropologist from the University of Virginia, received a substantial grant to study isolated Appalachian communities. Her research proposal focused on documenting traditional practices that might be disappearing due to modernization. What she discovered instead would cost her everything. Dr. Sharma's field notes, recovered from her abandoned research station, described encounters with families whose children displayed physical abnormalities that seemed to follow genetic patterns unlike anything in medical literature. She documented ritualistic practices involving strange symbols, guttural linguistic patterns that resembled no known dialect, and most troubling of all, evidence of technological interference that seemed to emanate directly from the communities themselves. Her final recorded entry, dated October 19, 2008, reads, "The equipment failures aren't random. They're responding to my presence, to my documentation efforts. The families know I'm here. They've known all along. The children watch me from the tree line with eyes that reflect light, like nocturnal predators. I'm being herded towards something, guided somewhere specific. I don't think I'm studying them anymore. I think I'm being studied." Dr. Sharma's research station was found completely emptied 3 days later. Her vehicle remained parked outside, keys still in the ignition, but every piece of research equipment, every note, every photograph had vanished without a trace. The pattern repeated with disturbing consistency. In 2012, investigative journalist Mark Caldwell began documenting unexplained phenomena in West Virginia mining operations. His editor received his final article submission at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. The piece detailed his infiltration of a frontier energy facility, where he claimed to have photographed maintenance procedures that bore no resemblance to any known industrial processes. The photographs showed figures in specialized suits descending into shafts that, according to geological surveys, shouldn't exist, carrying containers that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Caldwell's article was never published. By Thursday of that same week, his newspaper received word that he had voluntarily committed himself to a psychiatric facility in Nevada, claiming severe paranoid delusions. When his family attempted to visit, they were told he had been transferred to another facility. That facility claimed no record of his admission. Mark Caldwell had effectively vanished from existence, his investigation forgotten, his evidence disappeared. But perhaps the most chilling case involves what happened to the Apex Strategic Institute in 2015. This small but respected think tank had been quietly compiling data on unexplained economic patterns in Appalachian regions. Their analysis had identified what they termed impossible prosperity corridors, where certain family-controlled businesses consistently outperformed market predictions by margins that defied statistical probability. Dr. Isabella Vance, another Vance, an unsettling pattern I've noticed in my own research, the Institute's director, had begun mapping these corridors when she noticed they corresponded almost perfectly with areas where federal investigations had historically been abandoned or remained unsolved. The Institute's final report, discovered on encrypted servers after the incident, contained a startling conclusion. The economic anomalies suggest coordination between entities that official records indicate should have no contact with each other. The pattern implies a network of influence that extends far beyond regional boundaries, with tentacles reaching into federal agencies, international corporations, and academic institutions. The control is systemic, not coincidental. 3 days after this report was completed, the Apex Strategic Institute suffered what was officially ruled a gas leak explosion. The blast was so intense that investigators found virtually no salvageable evidence. All 5 researchers died instantly. The explosion occurred at 3:33 a.m., when the building should have been empty, yet security footage from a neighboring building showed figures moving inside the institute at the time of the blast. These figures appeared to be working methodically through the offices in the minutes before the explosion, though the footage was too grainy to identify individuals. Most disturbing was what happened to the families of these researchers. Within 6 months of the explosion, each family had relocated to different states. When contacted by journalists, they claimed to have no knowledge of their relatives' work at the institute. Dr. Vance's own son, when approached by a documentary filmmaker, stared blankly and insisted his mother had died in a car accident years earlier. He showed no recognition when presented with photographs of his mother at the institute or any memory of her research work, as if his memory had been surgically excised. The suppression efforts extend beyond eliminating individual threats. Entire information systems appear to be compromised. Academic databases experience mysterious corruptions when researchers attempt to access materials related to certain Appalachian families. Government archives develop unexplained gaps in their records. Digital publications disappear from the internet without explanation, leaving behind only dead links and confused references in other documents. In 2019, a computer security expert named Daniel Park noticed unusual patterns in internet traffic originating from remote areas of Kentucky and West Virginia. His analysis suggested the presence of sophisticated digital infrastructure in locations that, according to all official records, had limited internet access. Park documented what appeared to be coordinated information warfare, systematic manipulation of search results, targeted harassment of researchers, and the deployment of disinformation campaigns designed to discredit legitimate investigations. Park's investigation revealed bot networks operating from servers that, according to registration records, didn't exist. These networks appeared to be monitoring social media mentions of specific family names, automatically generating counter-narratives whenever anyone posted about unusual experiences in certain Appalachian regions. The sophistication of these operations suggested resources and technical expertise far beyond what should be available to isolated mountain communities. When Park attempted to publish his findings, he discovered that his research had been preemptively debunked by articles that appeared to have been written and distributed before he had even completed his investigation. These debunking articles contained specific details about his methodology and findings that he had shared with no one. Someone had not only gained access to his private research, but had prepared comprehensive counterarguments before he even knew what he would discover. The psychological warfare extends to family members of investigators. Researchers report that their relatives begin experiencing unusual phenomena. Nightmares featuring specific imagery, electronic devices malfunctioning in particular ways, and a growing sense of being watched. Children of investigators often develop inexplicable fears of rural areas or refuse to discuss anything related to their parents' work. Spouses report feeling compelled to discourage their partners from continuing their research, often unable to explain the source of their anxiety. Dr. Alina Reed, a clinical psychologist specializing in trauma, noted in her confidential report to a private foundation that families of investigators showed me changes in behavior and psychological state that correlated directly with the intensity of their relatives' research. The closer an investigator came to significant discoveries, the more severe the psychological distress experienced by their family members. Dr. Reed's most disturbing finding was that these effects appeared to be artificially induced. Brain scans of affected family members showed unusual activity in regions associated with fear and compliance, patterns that resembled those seen in victims of sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques. Her preliminary conclusion was that some form of targeted psychological warfare was being deployed against the families of investigators, designed to create internal pressure to abandon their research. Dr. Reed's study was terminated when she herself began experiencing the phenomena she was researching. Her final report, submitted to the American Psychological Association, described her own descent into paranoia and fear. She wrote of sensing presences in her home, of finding evidence that someone had been in her office despite sophisticated security systems showing no unauthorized entry, of her own children beginning to exhibit the same fear responses she had documented in other families. She disappeared shortly after, her research files left open on her computer, the last line a single, chilling question. Am I already one of them? The infrastructure supporting these suppression efforts suggests an organization with resources that rival those of nation-states. The coordination between digital warfare, psychological operations, economic manipulation, and physical intimidation implies decades of careful planning and enormous financial investment. This is not the work of isolated mountain families protecting local secrets. This is evidence of a conspiracy that has embedded itself so deeply within legitimate institutions that it has become virtually invisible. The most terrifying aspect of this revelation is its implications for everything we believe about transparency and accountability in modern society. If a network this sophisticated can operate undetected for decades, if it can systematically eliminate threats and manipulate information on this scale, then what other realities might be hidden from public knowledge? The Blackwood conspiracy may not be unique. It may simply be the one we've caught a glimpse of, a small visible portion of something much larger and more comprehensive. The evidence suggests we are living in a world where the fundamental assumptions about power, information, and reality itself may be carefully constructed illusions. The mountains of Appalachia may be hiding more than ancient secrets and supernatural bargains. The truth about the Blackwood family and their web of influence extends far beyond what we've uncovered. What we're witnessing isn't just a regional conspiracy. It's a preview of something much larger, something that challenges the very foundations of how power operates in America. Consider the implications. If a single family in the remote Cumberland Mountains can maintain this level of control, orchestrating cover-ups that reach into federal agencies, manipulating academic research, controlling corporate interests, and silencing investigators for over a century. What does that tell us about the systems we trust? The Blackwoods represent a model of hidden power that may exist in countless other forms across the country. The most disturbing aspect isn't just their supernatural practices or the ritualistic sacrifices. It's how seamlessly they've integrated into legitimate power structures. Government officials knowingly participate in cover-ups. University researchers suppress findings that threaten the family's secrecy. Corporate executives redirect investigations away from Blackwood interests. Military contractors mysteriously lose equipment near their territory. This isn't the work of rogue actors, it's systematic, institutional compromise. The evidence suggests the Blackwoods aren't unique. Their methods, their integration into power structures, their ability to maintain secrecy across generations, these tactics could be replicated anywhere. How many other families, other entities, other organizations operate with similar impunity? How many investigations have been quietly terminated? How many researchers have had their careers destroyed for asking the wrong questions? The technology we've documented, the sophisticated surveillance systems, the communication disruption capabilities, the psychological manipulation techniques, represents resources that go far beyond what any single family should possess. This suggests partnerships, alliances, or oversight from entities with access to cutting-edge technology and unlimited funding. The Blackwoods may be a local manifestation of something much more extensive, something reaching for a global scale. What's most chilling is the long-term planning. Documents suggest the family has been preparing for decades for some kind of great unveiling or revelation. Their influence networks aren't just defensive, they're positioning themselves for something larger. The systematic placement of allies in key institutions, the careful cultivation of dependencies, the strategic elimination of threats. This is the infrastructure of control being built for a specific purpose. The allied families I've tracked, the Millers, the Crosses, the Vances, the Coldwells, and the Parks, weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a broader pattern of supernatural bargains that created lasting power structures throughout Appalachia. The Blackwoods may have simply been the most successful, the most organized, the most ambitious in expanding their influence beyond regional boundaries. The implications for American democracy are staggering. If investigations can be terminated by phone calls from unnamed officials, if evidence can disappear from federal facilities, if academic research can be suppressed through economic pressure, then the transparency and accountability we assume exists in our institutions is fundamentally compromised. The Blackwood conspiracy reveals not just their power, but the vulnerability of the systems designed to check such power. Most troubling is what this suggests about other hidden influences. The Blackwoods maintain their secrecy through careful calculation and strategic patience. How many other entities operate with similar methods but different goals? How many decisions that shape our society are influenced by powers we never see, agendas we never question, interests we never identify? The mountains of Appalachia have always kept their secrets, but the Blackwood legacy proves that some secrets extend far beyond mountain hollows. Their story is a reminder that in America, as elsewhere, true power often operates in shadows, protected by networks of complicity that span generations and institutions. The watchers of the root that granted the Blackwoods their abilities may be ancient entities, but the systems they've used to maintain power are thoroughly modern. Surveillance capitalism, information warfare, institutional capture, economic manipulation. The Blackwoods have mastered the tools of contemporary control while maintaining connections to something far older and more dangerous. Perhaps the most important question isn't whether the Blackwood family can be stopped, but whether stopping them would even matter. Their influence has become so embedded in legitimate institutions that removing them might simply create a vacuum for other hidden powers to fill. The infrastructure of secrecy they've built could serve any number of purposes, any number of agendas. The Cumberland Mountains still echo with strange sounds on winter nights. Researchers still disappear when they venture too close to certain truths. Evidence still vanishes from secure facilities. The Blackwood family endures, protected by a conspiracy so vast and sophisticated that it may be impossible to fully comprehend, let alone dismantle. Their story stands as a warning about the fragility of transparency, the vulnerability of democratic institutions, and the persistence of hidden power. In the end, the most terrifying aspect of the Blackwood legacy isn't what they've done. It's what their success suggests about the true nature of power in America, and what other secrets might be waiting in the shadows, protected by networks of influence we can barely imagine. I, Alastair Finch, know this because as I tell you this story, I feel the whispers of the hollow in my own mind, the cold light in my periphery. My pursuit of the truth was never truly mine. It was a path laid out for me, just like for Thorne, for Vance, for Caldwell, and now perhaps for you. What chilling truth do you believe is hiding just beneath the surface of our world? Share your thoughts below.